G'day legends. In this video, we're going to talk about the power of bus processing. Now in your mixes, if you're not grouping your sounds together and doing a bit of processing on those groups, you're missing out on some potential magic that you could be adding to your mix. So I've been mixing a song for a local band today. These guys are called the Bin Lids, and they're a bit of a garage rock band from around Newcastle. And as I was getting close to the end of the mix, I thought, let's turn off the bus processing and see what this is actually adding. And boy, it's adding a lot. So let's check out the track. I've got processing on the drum bus, the kick bus, the snare bus, and the overhead. So there's a couple of groups within the drums that have bus processing going on. And then we've got some bus processing on the guitar solos, on the vocals, and then on the mix bus. All right, pretty dramatic difference. And I know some of you might be like, oh, it's louder when it's turned off and on. But technically, the peak volume of a lot of these tracks is exactly the same. So what I'm getting at is, it's actually the same kind of volume, but we're just juicing these tracks up. We're adding a bit of saturation, we're compressing them a bit harder, and it's bringing them up to add more perceived loudness. We're not actually adding any extra peak energy. We're just bringing the overall track up with some extra juiciness. So let's check out the processing that I'm using on these tracks to get this stuff to really come to life. And if you've watched a bunch of my mix videos, this is pretty different today. There's a bunch of different stuff happening here. So it's always good to try new plugins, new techniques. Don't box yourself into a one sound fits all kind of thing, because it doesn't. Experiment, try new things, because you will be pleasantly surprised when you achieve some really cool sounds. So first of all, we've got two plugins on the drum bus. First, we've got the Complex 760 limiter from Kiive Audio. You've heard me talk about this. I love this on the drums. It's really good. And it's quickly replacing a couple of plugins that I would use on the drum bus. I don't have any parallel compression going on the drums today. It's just this compressor, as well as whatever's happening on the individual channels, that's making up this drum sound. So I'm using the drum bus glue preset, and then I've just tweaked the parameters. This preset is pretty solid. So usually I just have to play with the input and output to make sure that we're not clipping the limiter too hard and sort of losing too much transient information. And then you can kind of play around with the threshold and the tone knob, and that gives you a really good sound, as well as these little parameters up here with the width, THD, and the mix. I've got the mix at about 79%. So let's have a listen to what it sounds like when we turn this compressor off and on. So it's just gluing it together. It's keeping everything under control, adding a little bit of extra excitement. So Noam Levenberg from Safari Pedals sent me this plugin a couple of weeks ago, but I was just so slammed with everything that's been going on that I just never really had a chance to check it out until today. So he was selling this for like $4 during the Black Friday sales, which is an absolute steal. So hopefully you picked it up in the sales, because it's awesome. But if you think this is cool, you can definitely grab it through a link in the description below. I'll have a link to Safari Pedals' website. You can go check out their stuff. They've got some really cool plugins. So basically it's a spring reverb amp, but it can also work as a dirt box, because there's this reverb knob here, and you can just dial this back and it ends up taking the reverb out, and it just ends up being like a drive amp. And so I was just looking through the presets and I found this drum bus on a Rhino preset, and I thought, no, I'll try this out on the drum bus. And I'm glad I did, because it sounds awesome. So check this out. So it's just adding some nice saturation, beefs them up in a really nice and pleasing way. The preset had the blend a little bit higher, but I didn't need that much saturation, so I just pulled the blend back a little bit. So let's check out what it sounds like when we bypass these two plugins, because they're definitely adding some nice vibe to the drums. So you can feel it beefs up the kick, and it adds a little bit of nice excitement to the drum sound. So I really like that. Now, if we take a dive inside the drums, and have a look at the bus processing to our kicks. So we've got a kick mic and a kick sample going to a kick bus. And on that bus, we just have a little bit of EQ, kind of just cutting out some low mid muds just to kind of help the kick be a little bit deeper, fatter, punchier sounding, and a little bit of air to the top end for a bit of clickiness. And then the magic is happening in this black box. So I'm just using the Kick It Up preset, and like I've played around with this and it's pretty much what I would set up anyway. So if you find good presets that work, don't be ashamed to use them because they'll save you a bit of time and they might give you the sound that you're looking for. The kick sounds so weak without it. I love that. So definitely using that to get a bit of grit to the kick and make it really punchy. So we also have a snare bus, which has our snare top mic and 2 snare samples that are blended in with that. We just have a tiny bit of EQ. So basically a little cut at 3.8K, just, I don't know, trying to get rid of a bit of harshness, and then a little boost up at 8K. They're very small moves. That's like 1 dB each kind of thing. And then we've got black box again, and basically similar thing, the Snare-tacular preset. Now this thing makes the snare slam. How good is that? Just makes the snare sound fat, thick and exciting. And you're probably just like, oh, but it's just louder. But it actually isn't. It's just a perceived loudness. The actual peak volume of the snare is a little bit louder without this on. So the distortion and the saturation that this is adding weight and volume, but it's only perceived. The actual peak volume is actually lower. So that's how you're going to get a little bit of extra headroom in your mix without having all those giant peaks and transients coming through. We're kind of squashing them out with some saturation, but it still sounds crisp and punchy, so that's what we like. So let's have a look at our overhead processing. So we've got both overheads sent to a bus, and all I'm using is the Kiive Audio Warming EP18. This is a free plugin, so again, link in the description below if you want to go grab this. It's an awesome, powerful Pultec style EQ plugin that's completely free, so go snag it. And basically, the overheads sound a bit gross on their own. They're a bit like muddy and unclear. A lot of like dirty mids and stuff in there. So all I've done is use an 8K boost, and we're pushing that up about 5 dBs, 5.5 dBs, and then a little roll off at 20 hertz, so about 2 dBs of that, just to kind of smooth the really top end out on that. Got a fairly broad bandwidth. And then getting rid of the mud out of this by boosting 60 hertz. So we've got about a 4 dB boost here, and then cutting about 4 dBs of the same frequency. So if you know anything about Pultec EQs, you know that boosting and cutting the same frequency adds a bit of a cut in the mids after. So we end up with an EQ that curves kind of like this into the sound. Love that, so smooth. I noticed this EQ is very smooth. So the top end on it is silky. So I don't know why this is free. So I mean, you should go get it before they change their mind and put a price tag on it. Okay, so that's the bus processing on our drums. Let's check it out without it again. Bringing a lot of excitement and clarity to the drum, so I love that. So let's check out our guitar solo bus. So we've just got 2 guitars that are grouped together, which make up our guitar solo. And on this, I wanted to add a bit of a kind of lo-fi-ish effect because the guitar sound was a little shrill, and Safari pedals have another fun plugin called Time Machine, and it's got kind of these different modes, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and it changes the overall kind of like EQ and tone and roll off, and you get some pretty interesting sounds out of it. So you can hear it's adding a little bit of like low mid bump to it, like the mids are getting pushed a little bit more. It's taking a little bit of the top end off, which is actually sounding really nice by having it on this 60s mode. I've got the blend pulled back a bit just to kind of keep a little bit of the brightness there so the guitar still cuts in the mix, but have a listen to what it sounds like when we push this all the way out. So it's pretty cool. And I am pushing the input, which adds a little bit of drive to it, as well as a little bit of compression. So overall, just adding a nice fullness to the guitar solo sound. And then after that, just a little cut in the mids. I felt it was a little honky around 8 to 900 hertz. So we just cut about 3 dBs there just to stop it sort of getting kind of honky in the mix. So you can hear it's adding some nice excitement to it, and it's also just making it sound nice and full in the mix. So I love that. Let's check out the vocal bus now. Now what I'm trying to do with this is deal with the dynamics, because we have a bunch of vocals that jump in and out doing group vocal stuff, sort of like chanty gang stuff. And rather than kind of playing with heaps of automation to try and make it sit right, I thought, let's just chuck an 1176 on here, fast attack, fast release. Now we just have this set so that when all the vocals jump in together, we get a little bit of extra gain reduction, and it pushes down and keeps everything level. So the whole time this thing is working a tiny bit, and then when the group vocals come in, it works extra and it keeps that vocal in place.
Doesn't take a genius to see. Somerset Park is just Westwood Brie. May God it's cheap, my friend, but there's no nice part of West Wall's End.
So I love these guys. They're singing about buying a nice house in a bad suburb. But anyway, they write some funny songs. And then following up from that, we just have Baby Audio Smooth Operator on the top end cleanup preset. Basically felt I needed to put this on because that last stage of compression started to bring out the S and T's a little bit, and I just wanted a little bit of extra de-essing going on.
But there's no nice part of West Wall's End.
So just a touch of that.
Thinks he's ahead of the curve. Got a nice place in a shitty suburb. This place is state of the art, a shitty suburb, but he says it's the nice part. Doesn't take.
Definitely doing its job. Now, last but not least, let's check out the mix bus, because this is actually adding a lot. And I was actually surprised at how much this was adding. So most of the time I'll put a compressor on at the start of a mix, but on this one, I just mixed it from the ground up, and then I added my mix bus processing closer to the end. Now, normally I'll have something like the VMR VCC on there, adding a bit of like console color. But today I thought, let's not use any Slate plugins, and let's try the Lindell 80 bus. So I've had this one for a while. Every now and then I reach for it, and this adds some nice weight to the sound. So I'm fairly certain it's a Kiive style thing, and with Kiive you always expect that kind of thick bottom end and silky top end. And so have a listen to what this adds to the mix. Do you hear that? It's pretty subtle, but if you're listening on some decent headphones or some good monitoring, you should have heard that kind of little bit of a bump in the low end. It sort of thickened the track up a little bit, and it really needed that. So when I put that on, I was like, wow, that sounds great. And the next thing I've got is the Shadow Heels Class A mastering compressor. I've had this for a really long time, and I kind of love and hate this compressor, because sometimes you use it and you're like, this sounds awesome. Sometimes you use it and then you come back later and you realize this is what's wrong with the mix. It's actually making things sound kind of mushy or like too thick. But I thought, let's give it another go today and let's try it out. And to start with, I just loaded up with the mastering medium preset, just because I know it's going to get some settings that I roughly like. And so we have dual compressors in here. We've got an optical compressor as well as a discrete compressor. Now, the optical compressor is where you can really damage a mix, because it's kind of a slow, mushy sounding compressor, in my opinion, on a mix. But on the right mix, it can sound awesome. And today, it sounds awesome. So I've just dialed it in, so we're only getting a tiny bit of gain reduction with this, like 1 dB max. Like, I don't want heaps of gain reduction on this. I'm just looking for that bit of color that it's adding. And then we're following that up with the discrete compressor with a fast recovery time, which is basically the release, and a slow attack. So it's not really clamping down on the mix. It's just adding a bit of color, a bit of vibe, a tiny bit of control. We also have it on this nickel setting. So there's a couple of different tone settings here. They're pretty subtle in my opinion, but the nickel is working good on this. So you can hear how it's adding that kind of thickness, that sort of like gooiness to the mix. And in some cases, I hate that. But today, I love that. So you could hear when I bypassed it, the mix still sounded good. It just sounded a little bit more crisp and transient. Whereas with this on, we're kind of getting a really kind of gluey sound. It's sort of like squishing the mix together a little bit. And I think that works really well for this kind of garage rock kind of sound that I'm going for today. So I think that's sounding really cool. And you can also play with the mix knob. Like if this was too much, I could just pull the mix knob back and just get a little bit of this in, which is generally what ends up happening when I'm using this. I go, oh, maybe 50%, oh, maybe 20%, maybe 0%. But nah, today I think this is awesome. And then lastly, I'm just chucking on the Modern Metal Songwriter Nova Clip. So this is a new clipping plugin that I've been trying out recently, and I did a video on it before, and I think this thing works really good. It has a little bit of a color to it. It adds a little bit of richness to the sound. So check it out. We've got auto gain on. We're pushing the clip up to just kind of get the kicks and snares a little bit. I don't want to get anything else. I'm just trying to rein in some peaks a little bit to maximize the volume here. And then I've just brought the shape up a bit as I thought the tone sounded kind of nice around here. So you can hear it's adding a little bit of extra weight to the mix. And I think that sounds really good, especially for this kind of song where I don't want it to be super, super clean. I kind of want it to have a little bit of that color, and I'm liking that. Okay, so here's our mix bus processing. So you can hear those three plugins are just adding some real power to the mix. They're adding a bit of weight to the mix and a bit of excitement. And it's sort of just making it sound a lot more alive. That's kind of the power of bus processing. So you can process your individual sounds and you can get them sounding as good as you can, but you can always take it a little bit further by adding a bit of bus processing, kind of bringing everything together within the group. And if you do it right, it can add a lot to a mix. And if you do it wrong, it can destroy a mix. So you just have to be careful. Usually it's best to be kind of subtle unless you're going for something really dramatic, like a special effect kind of thing. But you can see I'm not doing anything too crazy with these settings. They're all small moves, but they all stack up into the big picture. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you want to check out any of the plugins from like Safari Pedals, Kiive Audio, Modern Metal Songwriter, I have links to all the websites below to where you can go check out these plugins. And if you like them, grab a copy. And by doing that, you really help support this channel as well. And also don't forget to check out my website in the description below where you can go and check out my drum samples and mix courses as well. If you're interested in learning how to add separation and clarity to a mix, then check out this next video coming up.